point, if you wouldn't mind me breaking in. We got about 15 more minutes, Bill.
Okay.
And again, this is so great. Thank you. So some of my questions might be, maybe two or three to kind of wrap it up. Why don't you tell us, going through all the presidents from Roosevelt on, how you feel about each president? We don't want to give away too much, but we can edit it later. And then go ahead and tell us again. I hesitate to ask this. We work with a lot of Vietnam veterans, but I hesitate to ask. But if you feel like it, tell us a little bit about when you kind of the wrap up to your career in the Air Force and that part of the Vietnam War story. And I want to end this on a high note because this is so fabulous. What you've done is so fabulous. Your life is fabulous. You got a great family, I guess, and you were married for many years, right?
Still married.
Yes, and so happy there for that. And we want to hear how you felt flying planes. What was your favorite plane? Why do you like flying? Any close calls?
You want me to talk for a week?
Yes, sir.
Condense that to 15 minutes. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Up and away in the Air Force. Oh boy.
Well, let's first do a little flying.
Okay.
My favorite Air Force plane, my favorite SAC plane, because that was my career, was the B-47. The B-47 was a real leader in airplanes. Design-wise, we owe an awful lot to the people at Boeing who had the guts to build that airplane, because it was so radically different from anything else flying anywhere. It was a challenge to fly because it did have some danger involved. I think I described already to you guys about the fact that if you didn't learn how to fly that airplane and land it correctly, you weren't going to ever stay in the Air Force too long, because the B-47 was the predecessor to the B-52. I personally heard General LeMay say the only thing wrong with the B-47 is it's too small. We need a bigger B-47, and that's how we got the B-52. And he was very serious about it. He liked the B-47. He loved flying it, and because it was a challenge to fly, a difficult airplane to fly. But hell, we bought 2,030 of them, the biggest purchase of any aggressor-type airplane in the world, post-war, because we did buy 3,000 B-29s. Some of them were not too good and wound up as junk. But post-war, nobody bought as many bombers or fighters as we did the B-47s. 2,030 of those guys, and I loved flying them because they were a challenge. And if you could fly the B-47, you could sure as hell fly the B-52. The B-52 was easy to fly compared to the 47. It was the Cadillac compared to the Corvette. It really was. It was had such great systems that your six-man crew on your B-52, now they're down to 5 because they don't need a gunner anymore. That's another shuttle. But it's quite true. The 52 was just fantastically easy to fly, and it was dependable. Yeah, I loved to fly it. I got 5,136 hours in the B-52, and I loved it.
Wow.
I loved it. But the B-47 was the predecessor to it.
And you like that one better, though.
Yeah, because it was a challenge.
It was more challenging.
I've
Yeah,
got a
You
you-
may get bored.
You could roll a B-47. You could do a loop in a B-47.
Oh,
You
wow.
couldn't dare do that in a B-52.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you like to roll and loop a lot?
Oh, hell yeah. Every pilot does.
That's true.
Any pilot that denies that is a liar,
Lion.
because that's what flying is all about, having a little fun.
So what would you guys do when you were up there? Like, how would you even use the restroom? There's restrooms up there, or what in the world? And did you guys have food? I mean,
Well,
guys are going for hours.
yeah, we do. We have women flying B-52s now, you know. Oh, yeah. I don't know of any woman who ever flew a B-47 because we didn't have a women's room. For men, it was easy. We had a crew of 3, and the most you could ever have on board were 3 instructors flying without an ejection seat, you know, bail out by parachute and hope for the best if you had to. So you could have 6 people on a B-47, 3 in ejection seats and the other 2 hoping to God that nothing tragic happened. But we had very simple horn-shaped devices to urinate in.
Okay.
Yeah, collected in a can, right? And at first they had this rule that, hey, the first to use the can has to empty it. Well, you know, that didn't last very long. The crew members started complaining in it, and finally it trickled down to the ground crew. They had to empty the can.
It trickled down. Huh?
Yeah. Now, if you had the other situation that you had to use, if you had to actually poop something in the can, we had a special can for that. Yeah. And in the 47, it was one that they had used in the B-29. Of course, the B-29 had a crew of 10, so we had 3 of those in the B-29. And after, let's say, a 20-hour flight in a B-29, it was pretty putrid. And they all had to be emptied. By the time we got to the 47, they said 1 can is sufficient. All right. Oh, and the first guy that used the can has to empty it. Well, you know, we were all officers on the B-47. There were no enlisted men on the B-47. They were all officers. And they all started complaining. You know, here we have to have a natural act, and we have to take care of it. And we don't want to do that. And as soon as LeMay took over SAC, the first thing he said was, ground crew will take care of that
But
situation.
they love that.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so do you guys bring food with you?
Yeah, we had, and they still have it today, we had a flight kitchen at each SAC base, which took care of preparing box lunches. And they were pretty nice, because you got to order whatever you wanted. And I would say, I don't know this for sure, but I would say that most of the guys ordered steak, because they would grill the steak and then they would cut it into bite-sized pieces. And in the in the 47, I would order them as the crew commander, and I would get a little order form that you filled out that you turned in the day before you were flying, and each guy had his choice of whatever he wanted, you know, and they were pretty well done. They really were. LeMay himself intervened to say, these are our best people we have, and we want to feed them right. And so they did. And we had an assortment of liquids, you know, and we could order our own box lunch. My kids used to love it because I never ate all my box lunch. So when I got home, they got to get their choice of what was left, you know.
Wow.
The chiclets, the chocolate milk, the banana, whatever the hell they wanted, you know. Well, that carried on forward to the B-52. And they're still doing it today the same way. And the food has gotten better all along.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it has.
Professional chefs
Sure.
preparing it, yeah.
Exactly. Well, you know, we were flying
They do dangerous stuff.
our Chrome Dome missions, which we haven't even gotten to yet. Those were 26 hours. And we flew loaded with the proper amount of H-bombs in a great big circle over close to the North Pole, and we'd sit there in orbit waiting for the Russians to start the war. And we had good food. And because we had a gunner who was an enlisted man, he got to cook all our lunches.
What if he was no good at it?
He didn't have any choice.
Okay.
Of course, they've gotten rid of the gunner now on the B-52s. There's no more gunner on the 52s. But that was his primary job. Well, they did get to shoot down a MiG once in a while, but that was pretty rare.
Did you ever get to do that?
No, never did. I think there were a total of 3 MiGs that were shot down by gunners over South Vietnam. MiGs from the north, but MiG-21s, which is a pretty good airplane. But if you got within range of that tail gunner, he could sure get you, and 3 of them did. And they were all decorated for it.
Oh.
But anyway, today we have women flying B-52s. They're down to 5 people, and there is a notorious flight of 5 women: the navigator, the radar man, the pilot and the co-pilot, and the ECM man were all women, and they flew a mission just so that they could say that we now have an all
team.
woman crew. And they did modify the toilet situation so that it was comfortable for the women in a curtain that was drawn like in a hospital so that they could sit down and do their thing. And all the B-52s have been modified so that they can be,
Co-gender now.
yeah, right. We don't have the latest thing.
The other problem.
God, the ABC or whatever they call it. Anyway, but those were problems because when you fly a 26-hour mission, those people are going to have to use the toilet.
Did you just sleep in your seats then, or
The what?
well, how did you sleep after sitting there for 6
Oh.
hours? I mean,
We had the upstairs version of the nose of the airplane is nice and flat and wide, big enough to put a foam cushion, a bed. And it was expressly put there for the pilot and the co-pilot because they're, after all, flying the airplane. The other guys could do their best flying sitting in their seat. But the pilot, the way I used to use it was I would always get, maybe a 2-hour nap because I knew my co-pilot was dependable. And I'd get like a 2-hour nap before each refueling, because that's the most critical part of the flight, is getting your 120,000 pounds of fuel off of a tanker so that you can fly another 12 hours. So, and I think most of the guys did that too. It's awful hard to fly and take a 2-hour nap sitting in a good seat, and they were good seats, very maneuverable, 8-way position, and all that. But I found out as I got older that it was a good idea to lay down and take a nap before each refueling, because the guys depended on me to keep them alive. And that's the way most of them are doing it today. And they still have that cushion, although they have contoured it and made it, and made it a little more dependable for the sexes, which I think is pretty stupid myself, but that's not the point. But anyway, on those long missions, they could be longer than 26 hours. The normal Chrome Dome mission, which was the in the air on an alert situation, we called it airborne alert, ready to go to war. All the president had to do was to push that red button, and we're going to Russia or one of the satellite nations, And we did that for 29 years. We flew airborne alert. The other airplanes were all sitting on alert on the ground, because it just wasn't practical to have the whole damn Strategic Air Command in the air at once. But 1/3 were always in the air,
wow.
29 years. The rest of them were
Wow.
on alert on the ground, or flying training missions, or on leave, or in the hospital, you know. But it was a pretty valuable situation. We had one airborne alert mission that flew out of the western U.S. across the nation to pick up a tanker up to 85 North, which is just 5 degrees south of the North Pole, back down to Alaska, pick up another 120,000 pounds of fuel, fly out over the Aleutians, and back to Seattle, and then back to Beale Air Force Base. That was 26 hours. Now,
Isn't that kind of boring? I mean,
yeah. But the Navigators had to be very busy flying accurately,
well, the
right?
Navigators were busy, but you were just flying.
The pilots were just sitting up there. The pilots were just sitting up there
steering.
making decisions about what was showing on the instruments, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And the gunner was having his cigarettes and passing out lunches, you know. And the ECM guy was usually watching cartoons or whatever he wanted to do with all of his electronic equipment. But he was ready to go to war. And then we had another mission that flew out of the eastern U.S., which went out across the Atlantic into the Mediterranean Sea, not overflying anybody's airspace, but all the way to the eastern end of the Mediterranean, turn around and fly back to Beale. And that was 24 hours.
That was a short one.
Yeah. Well, then we had one other one, and that was the Thule Monitor. The Thule Monitor was a B-52, fully loaded, ready to go to war. But all he did was to take off from his base, wherever he was based, and fly out to the Davis Strait, which is in between Greenland and Canada.
Okay.
And we go right up the middle of the Davis Strait after getting a load of fuel. And then we would make contact with our base at Thule in Greenland, on the northwest corner of Greenland, right? Huge base, very important base. Figuring that if the USSR was going to hit us, they would hit Thule first with a couple of missiles. Very, very important. So, the Thule Monitor was a B-52, and he was circling in a kind of a rectangle offshore from Thule, monitoring Thule visually and by radar. And if Thule disappeared, the war started. And that would be our first recognition of the Third World War, would be Thule was gone.
Whoa.
Now, that was called the Thule Monitor. Now, I know this sounds utterly fantastic, but that's the truth. It's called the Thule Monitor, and they don't do this anymore. But
The base is still there, though.
huh?
The base is still there.
Oh God, yeah. It's still
very important.
It's still one of our primary bases. You bet. Courtesy of the Danish government, you know.
Oh,
They
thank
own
you.
it. They own it, and they have half a dozen people there, you know. So it's a Danish Air Force base. It's a I wouldn't call it beautiful, but it is sustainable. It's permanent, you know, and we owe the Danes an awful lot for the use of their base. We certainly do. I've only been there once, and I was anxious to get the hell out of there as soon as I got
Is it
there.
cold?
Oh, God, yes. Year round, it's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But it was necessary, and it was the only base that was really useful to us that was so close to the Red Wall.
Right.
Yeah, and I think they probably figured it out correctly. If the war did start, that's where it would start. Thule Monitor.
Man.
Most people never heard of it.
Okay, Bill, we got time for one more
That's
story.
it. Oh, wait, video near full.
One more
So
story.
that means you
okay.
got like maybe, what, 5 minutes?
Oh, all right. Let me tell you a little bit while we're on the crew thing. I think it's
Sure.
important to notice